Wyoming Territory, August 1882. The dust had barely settled from the wagon wheels when the woman stepped down, baby on her hip, dog trembling at her feet. Quinn Ellery had been mending a split rail near the southern pasture when he spotted the wagon rolling up the ridge trail, sun burning low behind it. He had been expecting a delivery of seed grain from Laramie, not a woman in a worn blue dress with a child clinging to her shoulder, and a mutt barely able to stand. She looked like she had not slept in days. Her hair was the color of dry wheat, braided tight against her neck, her face drawn but proud. The baby, maybe a year old, maybe younger, peered out from the crook of her arm, wide-eyed and silent. The dog, some kind of shepherd mix, shook so hard its ribs rattled. Quinn dropped the fence tool and walked slow toward the gate, his boots crunching on dry grass. "Ma'am?" he asked, tipping his hat. "You lost?" The woman's voice cracked. "No, sir. I was told this was the Ellery ranch." "You are Quinn Ellery, are you not?" "I am. I am your bride," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble of her chin. "My name is Elaine Everhart. We were arranged through Marshal Carver in Rawlins. I have the letter." She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket with her free hand, holding it out. Quinn stared at her. At the baby. At the dog. "I do not expect charity," Ada added quickly. "I can cook, so, tend stock. I brought my own linens. The child is mine. The dog was my husband's. He passed on in April." Quinn didn't take the letter. He opened the gate instead. "Come on in," he said quietly. She blinked, then stepped through, the dog limping behind. Her boots dragged, coated in trail dust. She walked like someone used to carrying everything on her back. "You got a name for the little one?" he asked. "Faye," Ada said, brushing a hand over the baby's hair. "She is just about to turn 1. She does not cry much." Quinn looked at the girl. Big eyes, brown like Ada's, and a calm stare. "She looks sharp," he said. Ada gave a tired smile. "She is." He led them toward the house, a modest 2-room cabin with a cookstove and a porch that needed repainting. The yard was fenced for chickens, though none had been kept since the foxes came through the previous spring. Inside, it was clean if plain. A cot stood folded near the hearth. He had never thought to put it up. "I did not mean to arrive this late," Ada said, standing just inside the doorway. "But the man driving the wagon had to turn off at Deer Creek, and I thought it best to keep going." "You came all the way from Kansas?" Quinn asked. "I did. That's a hard road." "It was." He watched her set the baby down gently on the cot. Faye blinked up at the low beams, then reached for the dog, who lay beside her, still shaking. "I can cook supper," Ada offered. "If you have anything to spare." He nodded toward the pantry. "There's salt pork, beans, and flour. Should be a few eggs left, too." Ada moved with purpose, sleeves rolled, apron tied. She did not talk much, and he liked that. She worked while the baby dozed, the dog curled near the fire. Quinn stepped outside to finish up the fence, but his hands kept drifting to the same nail. His thoughts were inside now. When he came back in, the table was set with 2 plates and a third smaller one with a bit of mashed beans for Faye. Ada sat straight, her fingers folded in her lap. "I hope it is to your liking," she said. He took a bite. It was better than anything he had cooked in months. "Thank you," he said. She nodded. "Thank you for letting me in." They ate in quiet, with only the ticking of the mantel clock and the soft whimper of the dog. Afterward, Ada nursed the baby, back turned modestly toward the hearth. When she stood again, she looked toward him. "I will sleep on the cot," she said. "It is not unfamiliar." "I can take the cot," he offered. "No." Her voice was firm. "You work the land. You need rest more than I." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right." She settled the baby, tucked the dog's thin body under a blanket near the cot, and blew out the lamp. The night was long and quiet. Quinn lay awake, listening to the wind scratch against the shutters, the soft exhale of the woman and child just feet away. He had not expected any of this. He had written that letter half a year ago, when winter was bad and loneliness worse. He never thought anyone would answer. Morning came with the smell of coffee. Ada was already up, hair braided again, baby on her hip. "I can help with the animals," she said, handing him a mug. They moved through the day like they had done it for years. She fed the chickens, gathered eggs, swept the porch while Faye clung to her skirts. He repaired a broken hinge on the barn, kept glancing toward the house. That evening, after supper, he found her outside near the fence, holding the baby while the dog lay in the grass. "Was he a good man?" Quinn asked quietly. Ada looked down at Faye. "He was kind. But he got sick last winter, and we had no money left. He wanted me to remarry. Said it would be better for the baby." Quinn nodded. "You could have gone anywhere. I did not want to go east. That life never fit me. And your letter? It was honest." He looked at her then. Really looked. "You still want to stay?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "Yes. If you will have me." Behind them, the baby laughed, reaching for the dog's ear. Quinn stepped over and opened the gate to the pasture. "Then come see the rest of it," he said. "If you are going to be here, it is your land too." She smiled, and that smile was soft and tired and real. "Come on, Faye," she whispered. "Let us go see home." The first frost came early that year. Not hard enough to bite the roots, but enough to silver the grass along the ridge and leave the water trough skin-thin with ice by dawn. Quinn noticed Ada's hands were red that morning, knuckles cracked from drawing cold water before sunrise. She didn't complain. He doubted she ever would. He was in the barn splitting kindling when she stepped in, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders and a strip of muslin tied around her palm. Faye was on her hip again, cheeks pink from the wind. The dog had taken to trailing after the horses now, steadier on its feet, but never straying far from Ada's shadow. "You've got a loose rail on the chicken yard," she said, nodding toward the east side of the house. "I can patch it if you've got wire." "I'll take care of it after breakfast," Quinn said. "You should rest that hand. I can still hold a hammer." Her tone wasn't sharp, just certain. He looked at her, then crouched to pull a coil from beneath the workbench. "Use this one. The older spool snap." Ada nodded and turned to leave. Faye had begun to hum low and tuneless, but steady, like she knew the world was holding together. Quinn waited until the barn was quiet again before he stepped back out. The clouds were moving in slow from the west, heavy and steel-colored. Snow wouldn't be far behind. He'd need to bring the heifers closer to the house and double-check the roof on the feed shed. There hadn't been time yet to teach Ada much about the land, but she'd taken to the rhythm like she'd always lived beneath a wide sky. Later that afternoon, while the baby napped and Ada kneaded dough in the kitchen, Quinn saddled the mule and loaded 2 sacks of grain. The general store in Elk Bend had been running short of molasses and lamp oil, and he figured it was better to stock up before the road iced over. "You'll be all right here?" he asked as he tied the last strap. Ada wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch. "We'll be fine. I've got cornbread in the oven and the dog's finally loud enough to warn off a stranger." Quinn smiled faintly. "Back before dark." She watched him ride out, one hand resting on the porch rail, her fingers still dusted with flour. The baby stirred inside, letting out a brief cry that faded as she moved to soothe her. He glanced back once. She was already gone from the doorway. By the time he returned, the light had dropped low and the wind had picked up. The baby's laughter reached him before he turned the corner of the barn. Ada was kneeling in the yard, Faye standing with unsteady legs between her hands, the dog circling gently beside them. It was the first time he'd heard the girl laugh a high, fluttery sound like creek water over pebbles. "She took 3 steps," Ada said as he dismounted. Her eyes were bright, hair loose from its braid. "Just now. 3 of them." Quinn hunkered down near the fence, resting his arms on the rail. "Well, that's worth coming home to." The baby reached toward him, then dropped to her knees in the grass, giggling when the dog licked her ear. "She's going to run by spring," Ada said. He watched the three of them, the woman, the child, the dog, all gathered in the fading gold of the yard. There was a stillness in his chest that settled there like something long overdue. "I brought back a bolt of flannel," he said. "Red and gray pattern. Figured you might want to make something warmer. That's kind of you. I thought you might want to sew a sleeping gown. For her. Or for yourself." She straightened slowly, brushing grass from her skirt. "I've been meaning to ask about the fence line, up past the cottonwoods. It curves inward, almost like someone cut the corner." "They did. My brother-in-law years back. Tried to square it, but the land slopes too much there." She nodded. "I'd like to try a small winter garden come March. Just root vegetables. That spot catches light longer than the rest." He set his hat on the post and leaned back. "If you want it, it's yours." She didn't thank him. Just looked at the patch of earth beyond the fence, measuring the shape of it with her eyes. That night, after Faye had been laid down and the fire burned low, Quinn stepped inside from the porch with the last of the kindling. Ada stood near the hearth, mending a tear in the baby's blanket. The lamp behind her cast her shadow long and narrow across the floor. "I was thinking," he said. "Next week, if the weather holds, we could ride out to the canyon rim. There's a spring-fed creek there, and it's sheltered. Good place to show you the lay of the land. Will it take long?" "Half a day." "We'll bring lunch. They can ride with you." She glanced up, needle paused mid-stitch. "It sounds fine." He hesitated near the door, then added, "There's a stone up there. Big one. I carved my mother's name into it when she passed. It's not much, but I visit it every year come October." Ada's hand stilled. "Thank you for telling me." He started to turn back toward the door, but her voice stopped him. "Quinn?" He looked over. "I've been thinking about the cot." He waited. "I don't mind sharing the bed. If you don't either." His breath caught, not from surprise but from the quiet weight of it. The way she said it, not as offer or bargain, but as something settled inside her. "I don't mind," he said. She nodded once and finished her stitching, the needles slipping clean through the cloth. The morning they rode out to the canyon rim, frost clung to the mule's mane and the wheat-colored grass made a soft hiss under the hooves. Quinn lifted Faye into Ada's arms before helping her mount, his hand steady at her back just a breath longer than necessary. She didn't flinch from the touch. He led them eastward along a narrow trail that followed the rise of the land. Wind moved slow through the pines, the hush of it pressing against their shoulders without urgency. The sky held no clouds, just the hard blue of early winter. "Did your mother come from this territory?" Ada asked as they crested a ridge. "She was born near the Sweetwater River. Her people were Shoshone, though she spoke English better than most schoolteachers. Married my father when she was near your age. He built the house from scratch." Ada shifted Faye's weight against her hip. "Did she teach you her language?" "A little," he said. "Enough to understand when someone's cussing me out." She gave a quiet sound, almost a laugh, but not quite. The trail narrowed as they approached the bluff. The mule picked its way careful over the stones. When they reached the edge, Quinn stopped and tied the reins to a low juniper. The canyon opened wide below them, the creek flashing silver where it curled between rock and cottonwood. He stepped aside and let Ada take it in without words. She stood with her free hand resting on the saddle horn, her eyes fixed on the far rim. "I thought Kansas was flat until I came here," she said. "You can see 3 counties from this spot on a clear afternoon," he told her. "And 2 herds of elk if you're lucky." Faye squirmed, reaching for the pine needles underfoot. Ada lowered her to the ground and knelt beside her, brushing twigs from the little girl's bonnet. "I never had land of my own," she said. "Not really." Quinn crouched nearby, one knee pressed to the cold dirt. "You do now." She looked at him, not startled, just quiet. "When I said yes to Marshal Carver's arrangement, I didn't expect to find kindness. That wasn't in the letter, he said. No. But you've given it anyway. Quinn didn't answer. He reached for a flat stone near his boot, then tossed it over the edge where it clattered down and vanished into the scrub below. Do you want to see the marker? He asked. Ada nodded, and he led her to a weathered boulder tucked behind a stand of cedar. The carving was shallow but clear. Margaret Ellery, 1835–1872. Nothing more. She died young, Ada said. Fever. Took my father 6 days to ride for help, and by then she was wrapped in quilts. Ada brushed her fingers across the edge of the stone, not the name, just the cold sandstone beneath it. Did she know this was here? She used to sit up here when she was missing her people. Said it made the world feel less narrow. A gust of wind lifted Ada's braid and tugged at the baby's shawl. Faye made a soft noise and leaned against her mother's leg. I brought bread and dried apples, Ada said, reaching into the saddlebag. We can eat here. They sat on a flat patch near the pine roots, the baby between them with crumbs on her chin. Ada poured water from a tin flask and handed it to Quinn without looking at him directly. I was 17 when my first husband married me, she said. I thought that would be the whole of it. A small house, maybe another child. But he never got well again after his lungs went bad. Quinn drank, then passed the flask back. You miss him? She considered. I mourned what we didn't get a chance to build. But I don't carry grief the same way anymore. It's worn smooth. He watched Faye toddle between their boots, one hand dragging her doll through the dirt. The dog had followed them halfway up and now lay panting in the shade, ears alert. I never expected a child, Quinn said. Didn't think I'd be fit for raising one. Ada turned to him then, her gaze clear and steady. You are. He didn't speak after that, and she didn't press. They stayed until the sun shifted and the shadows stretched long over the canyon floor. Then they packed the crumbs and lifted Faye onto the saddle again, her small hands gripping Ada's coat. The ride back was quiet. Just before they reached the house, Ada leaned forward slightly in the saddle. Quinn? He looked up. I'd like to make curtains for the front window. Something warm-colored. The room feels cold after sunset. All right, he said. I'll bring back fabric from the next ride out. She offered no thanks. Just gave a small nod and held Faye closer as the mule stepped over the last rise, the roofline of the cabin coming into view. That night, after the fire had gone low and the lamplight lay soft across the quilt, Ada lay beside him, Faye asleep in her cradle near the hearth. Her hand found his beneath the blanket, not searching, just resting there. He didn't move. I don't want to leave again, she whispered. You don't have to. She turned toward him, the firelight catching the line of her jaw. I know. Neither reached for more than that. But something settled between them, quiet and sure, like the earth finally holding still after a long tremble. The next week brought 3 days of sleet that clung to the roof like wet wool. The woodpile shrank faster than Quinn liked, so he spent most mornings swinging the axe beneath the lean-to while Ada kept Faye near the hearth, hands busy with needle and thread. The fabric he brought back from Elk Bend deep rust and a soft brown was now shaped into curtains that hung over the front window, catching the firelight in rippling folds. One evening, after supper, Ada laid her sewing aside and leaned forward with her elbows on the table. The lamp cast a low glow across her face, softening the lines near her eyes. Your barn's got a draft through the west wall, she said. I heard it this morning while I was checking the milk pail. Quinn nodded. Slats have been warping since last thaw. I plan to patch it before snow settles in for good. I can help you brace it, she offered. If you've got a second hammer. He hesitated. You ever done work like that? My father was a cooper. I held boards steady while he set hoops. I know where to stand and when not to speak. Quinn's mouth twitched. That'll do. The next morning, they bundled Faye in a blanket-lined box beside the hayloft ladder, where the air stayed warmer and the dog could curl up nearby. Ada tied her scarf tight beneath her chin and took the hammer without fuss. They worked without talk, passing nails back and forth, shoulders brushing in the narrow space between support beams. Her swing was sure, and she didn't flinch when the wind howled through the split boards. When the wall was braced and the last slat nailed into place, she stepped back and brushed sawdust from her skirt. Her cheeks were flushed, hair damp at the temples. "You're not afraid of hard work," Quinn said. "I'm afraid of nothing steady," she replied. "But this," she glanced toward the cradle box where Faye slept. "This feels like it might hold." He didn't answer, just bent to gather the tools. But something in his chest felt different, like a knot had loosened without him noticing. That night, Quinn stayed up after Ada had gone to bed. He sat near the stove with the ledger open across his lap, pencil in hand. The numbers weren't good, not bad either, but tight enough to warrant caution. Feed had gone up again. The mule's left shoe was worn near through. If winter dragged long, they'd have to ration flour. He heard the creak of the floorboards and looked up. Ada stood in the doorway, shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was down, loose past her collarbone. "You work late," she said. "I try not to." She crossed to the table and sat down without waiting to be asked. "Does it look grim?" "No worse than most years. Just narrower." She reached for the pencil and turned the ledger toward herself. "I once kept books for a store outside Topeka. The owner drank through most of his receipts, but I learned to make sense of what was left." "You kept it running?" "For a while. Until the bank called everything due." They worked quietly for a time, her handwriting even and small beside his heavier scrawl. When she finished, she tapped the page. "You could sell 2 of the older hens. They've stopped laying, haven't they?" He nodded. "And if you can spare the labor, I can take in mending from the folks near Elk Bend. There's always trousers needing patching this time of year. You think folks'll trust their sewing to someone new?" "I won't ask them to. I'll show them what I can do." Quinn closed the ledger. "All right." She didn't stand. "I never had this," she said after a while, her voice low. A table shared in the quiet. Decisions made with someone who listens. "You have it now." She looked at him, and for the first time, didn't look away. Outside, the wind had calmed. The fire was burning low, casting long shadows across the plank floor. He stood and reached for the lamp, but paused. "Come on," he said. "Bed's warmer than this room." She followed him without a word, her hand brushing his as they passed through the doorway. The creek thawed slow that spring. By March's end, water trickled beneath the ice crust, and the cottonwoods along the gulch began to shimmer with the first pale buds. Quinn dug furrows by hand behind the barn, where Ada had marked out rows with string and stones. Faye sat in the grass nearby, her legs sturdier now, hands clutched around the wooden spoon she'd taken a liking to. The dog lay curled beside her, no longer shaking, only watching. Ada worked with her sleeves rolled and her hem pinned up, moving between the new garden beds with careful, practiced steps. Her back was straighter lately, her voice looser when she laughed. It came more often now, quiet, but full. "Once I get the carrots in, I want to try beets," she said, brushing dirt from her palms. "They'll keep through the cold if we store them right." Quinn handed her the sack of seed. "We've got the old apple crate in the cellar. I'll line it with straw." She looked up from the soil. "You've lived alone a long time, haven't you?" "I have. I can tell." "You remember everything except where the dishcloth goes." He leaned on the shovel, the corner of his mouth twitching. "I figure I'm learning." She smiled, then turned back to her planting. The wind shifted through the grass, and for a moment, everything held still, just the two of them, the child, the dog, the open sky. Later, Ada took Faye into town for the first time. The wagon ride was long, but she insisted on going herself, bundled the child in a wool shawl and tucked the mending samples into a basket. Quinn hitched the team and watched her go, one hand resting on the porch rail until they disappeared down the ridge road. She returned late afternoon, windblown and pink-cheeked, the baby asleep against her chest. The basket beside her held a bundle of worn trousers and 2 shirts, neatly folded. "Mrs. Hanley says if I can patch her husband's cuffs right, she'll send the rest next week," she said, stepping down from the wagon. Quinn lifted Faye into his arms and cradled her against his shoulder. "You've got a business now. I've got a way to help," Ada said. "That's enough." That night, she set the mending beside the hearth and sat at the table while he dried the dishes. "I saw the preacher in Elk Bend," she said. "He asked if we'd like to make things official." Quinn looked at her, then set the towel down. "Do you want to?" Ada didn't answer right away. Her fingers rested lightly on the table's edge. "I'd like to stand beside you and call it true. Not just for the town. For us." He crossed the room and offered his hand. She took it without hesitation. "We'll say the words," he said. "Whatever ones you want." They were married beneath the cottonwoods 3 days later. The preacher rode out with his wife and a bundle of wildflowers. Faye toddled between Ada's skirts, clutching a pine cone with both hands. Quinn wore his cleanest shirt, Ada her blue dress with the cuffs newly hemmed. The vows were plain, spoken soft. There were no guests but the trees and the wind and the ridge behind them. After the preacher rode off, Ada sat on the porch steps, Faye in her lap. Quinn brought out 2 cups of coffee and sat beside her. "You didn't say much up there," she said. "I meant all of it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "So did I." The sun dipped behind the hills, casting the fields in bronze. Somewhere beyond the barn, a pair of cranes wheeled through the sky, their shadows long across the pasture. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. The curtain she'd sewn held the warmth close, and the walls no longer echoed like they used to. That night she lay beside him with her hand tucked beneath his, her breathing slow and even. He watched the lamplight trace across her cheek, the quiet curve of her mouth. "I never thought I'd belong to anything again," she whispered. "But I do now." He pressed his lips to her hair, drawing her closer. "So do I." Years passed. The garden grew wide with each spring, carrots, beets, turnips thick as a man's fist. The hens were replaced, the barn repaired again and again. Faye learned to read by lamplight, her fingers tracing letters on the same table where Ada once stitched shirts for strangers. The dog grew old and died by the hearth one autumn evening, its head in Ada's lap. They buried him beneath the cottonwoods. They built a second room onto the cabin and a lean-to for the mule. Ada's sewing earned enough to trade for muslin and buttons, sometimes even honey. Quinn taught Faye to ride, to mend tack, to hush a horse with only a hand and a low word. She grew tall and strong, her eyes sharp like her mother's, her laugh full like her father's. They never left the land. Not even once. They didn't need to. On their 10th year together, Ada stood beside the same ridge where they'd first looked out over the canyon. Quinn came up behind her, his hands calloused and warm on her waist. "It still takes my breath," she said. "So do you," he answered. And she turned into his arms, the wind lifting her braid, the sky wide and bright above them, and kissed him like she had always known exactly where she belonged.